What if I told you that the place that meant the most to people in Stevens Point wasn't the University of Wisconsin-Stevens Point, the Stevens Point Brewery, Schmeeckley Reserve, Belt Soft Serve, or the downtown square, but a now vacant building that was built in 1894 and is listed on the U.S. National Registry of Historical Places. To many, the Fox Theater on Main Street represents their childhood, a pastime of inexpensive entertainment, and a place where spending hours on end getting lost in the fantasies of storytelling became reality. Fifth-generation Stevens Point native and current president of the Portage County Historical Society, Tim Siebert, is just one of the many whose fondest past memories were of the Fox Theater.
During the summer, they used to have a program whereby they would sell kids tickets, or their parents obviously, tickets for a summer-long movie presentation. So what would happen is that every Saturday at 1 o'clock, you'd present one of your tickets, and there were usually 8 or 12, last all summer, and there would be a cartoon, usually a short, which involved a serial, like The Lone Ranger or something like that, Zorro. And of course, right at the end of the serial, Zorro, or whoever it was hanging on a cliff, and the rope was about to break, and then they'd start the next week with how he saved himself. And then there'd be a feature film, usually for kids. And the place was packed, and by 4 o'clock in the afternoon, it'd be done. But it was a way to occupy kids, and it was fun.
Among the stars who graced the stage at the Fox Theater, including Harry Houdini, other Wisconsin heroes took in a showing or two. This was something Siebert learned in an unconventional way.
The other thing about the Fox Theater is it was the place to go, where films, current films, whatever they were the place to go. And I can remember going with my parents at one point. I don't remember, it was a cowboy show because that's what most movies were at the time. And I couldn't see a darn thing because this big tall guy was sitting in front of me, and I was mad as heck because I couldn't see the film. Well, come to find out it was Boyd Dowler. The whole line was Packers because they used to train here at Bugall Park. So I couldn't see around this guy because he was about 12 feet tall. And only later found out it was the Packers.
There was also always an unwanted guest that added to its illustrious reputation, one anyone who attended the Fox Theater back in the day would be able to recall.
There's the main theater seating, which kind of slopes downward toward the stage. But then there's a balcony up there, and the bats were always up in the balcony. And then they'd fly down and zoom at the little screen, and then zoom back up again.
While the University of Wisconsin-Stevens Point campus was opened in the same year as the opening of the theater, it did not offer many of the out-of-classroom activities in its earliest days. The rules students of those days had to follow were a lot stricter, and the Fox quickly became one of the only available entertainment venues. As years went on and inflation began to run its course, the Fox had to roll with the changes, meaning price increases. Naturally, these price increases did not sit well with the students, as they actively protested the hike in prices to eventual succession.
You got to remember that for university kids at the time, there wasn't a whole lot else to do. The university didn't have all sorts of things that students could do. And girls had to be in the dorm by 10 o'clock or they were kicked out of school. So if you went on a date, where else you going to go other than a movie? There just wasn't a whole lot else to do in the evening, and you had to be back. So the Fox was a real focus. And students were pretty irritated that they upped the price.
While the Fox became the centerpiece of downtown Stevens Point, another theater tried to emulate the success of the Fox. That theater was called the Lyric Theater and had a very difficult time trying to compete with the Fox, ultimately having to resort to showing different sorts of films and leading to its closure in 1957.
Well, Lyric was 2-3 doors east of the Fox. And my remembrance of the Lyric is they tended to show, now you got to remember we're talking 50s, 60s here, so movies that today would not, nobody'd bat an eye, but at the time they tended to be cutting edge, shall we say, in terms of sexual explicitness and that sort of thing. So it wasn't exactly X-rated, but it fringed.
Perhaps the greatest resource for any information on theaters, not just in central Wisconsin, is current UWSP communication professor and former executive director of Wausau's Grand Theater, Jim O'Connell. O'Connell has seen the Grand Theater rise and, unfortunately, the Fox Theater dissipate, due to a few particular reasons.
The Wausau Mall was a tremendous success. Stevens Point wanted to emulate that success with a downtown shopping mall, and they took that space behind Main Street and created it there. It was less successful for a variety of reasons, part of it having to do with the fact that it was separate from Main Street and therefore and could be accessed without even ever seeing Main Street. So it didn't act as the kind of stimulus for storefront activity that the mall in Wausau did.
The installation of the downtown mall required partial destruction to the Fox Theater, specifically the dressing rooms and back staging areas, which in turn handicapped the types of entertainment the theater could then offer. In addition to that, the Fox Theater was never initially designed to hold massive crowds like the Grand Theater was, which hindered its ability to function at a high level and paved the way for the Grand to take over as Central Wisconsin's entertainment hotspot.
The other big difference between the two, between the Fox and the Grand, is that the Grand was a 1,200-seat space. The Fox was a generation earlier in theatrical venues in this country. The Grand was originally a 1920s movie palace. The Fox was an 1880s opera house. 1880s opera houses maxed out at 600 seats. 1920s movie palaces were generally 12 to 1,500 seats. And originally the Grand was 1,400 seats. So essentially it was twice the size of the Fox. What that meant was that touring attractions that are touring theatrical productions, touring dance productions, touring music productions had twice as many seats to make their costs for a night's activity, so that the Grand would inevitably be a more viable, financially viable venue for touring professional attractions than the Fox would be, just because of seating capacity.
Seeing the Grand Theater soar quickly made many in Stevens Point think that there was no reason that the Fox Theater could not be the same high-level attraction.
When the Grand Theater in Wausau was renovated in 1987, it became a focal point of downtown. So that enhanced the notion that the Fox could be revived, and if it were revived, it would be a great thing.
The structure of Wausau's downtown, dubbed the 400 block, is made in a grid fashion, which is nothing like that of Stevens Point's downtown square. This became yet another disadvantage for the Fox in their effort to create a downtown area that offered more at night than just the typical bar scene.
There are 5 streams of people that feed a downtown and that keep it healthy. There are people who work downtown, there are people who shop downtown, there are people who visit downtown, there are people who live downtown, and then there are people who come downtown for arts and entertainment. And the important thing about that stream is that's the one that flows at night. The 18-hour vitality of the core of the community is what a venue like the Grand provides. It means that you don't roll up the sidewalks at 5 o'clock.
As downtown Wausau gradually became a hotbed for various activities, downtown Stevens Point continued to remain stagnant, and the Fox Theater to continue to deteriorate in looks and in revival interest as a movie theater. The Rogers Cinema certainly did not help either.
I think part of the success of the Grand is that the Grand is not solely dependent on those 100 activities that attract 1,000 people during the course of a year. On Saturdays, particularly in the summer, it is almost entirely used for weddings. We connected the Grand to one of the other historic buildings on the block and turned that connection space and that building into an art gallery so that there is a business hour activity on the block. So the combination of those things that allow for the space to be active even when there's not a performance in it, is part of the reason for the success of the program.
Ownership of the Fox changed hands in the late 2000s, as the Sanders family, who owned the theater for years, donated the facility to what is now Create Portage County. Create developed a committee who have tried to make the Fox great again over the past several years, to no avail. Now, a new reinvigorated push has an idea to completely change the notion of the Fox as just a theater, one that has huge potential.
Greg Wright, Bill Sherrill, and the folks who've been on that Fox committee did an awful lot of research. And they came up with a terrific idea about turning the space into a flexible performance space, abandoning the old seating chart and creating a more flexible space that could accommodate film, could accommodate small dance activity, could accommodate small to medium-sized gatherings or exhibitions, and to create for the space a sense of, perhaps a pub space or the kind of facility that people could come to even when there wasn't a performance. It's a really smart plan. The question is, can they find somebody to invest in it?
Like O'Connell mentioned, an investor is the missing piece to the puzzle of fixing the Fox Theater. As the budget grows tighter and tighter on UWSP, the university is not in a great position to lend a helping hand. It may take a lot of hard work and financial help, but with it could come a reinvention of the Fox and drastic improvement that Main Street certainly needs.